Katayoun Kishi, Head of Data Science at ACLED, the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project. We're showcasing our tool, the Conflict Alert System, or CAST, here at Paris Peace Forum. It's a conflict forecasting tool that looks at the number of violent events that will occur in the next month, looking 6 months into the future for every country around the world and in every province within those countries. So we use machine learning models to basically ingest ACLED data, which is a data set on political violence and demonstrations in every country around the world, released weekly. So we have a lot of information coming in about conflicts, and we can use machine learning models to basically detect patterns within that data and sort of project it forward. So we're able to look quite accurately, actually, at a lot of different conflict contexts, and in some cases predict exactly the number of events that we're going to see. So in October, for example, we predicted the exact number of events in Somalia and in Sudan as far as battles or explosions or violence against civilians there. Yeah, so the hope really is to familiarize policymakers, humanitarian organizations, people who are on the ground in these places to use the tool to be able to look forward and hopefully allocate resources, maybe divert attention or funds or aid to certain areas, and hopefully sort of prevent these attacks from even happening, or at least mitigate some of the ways that these conflicts are developing and being able to anticipate basically how they're going to change into the future. Yeah, so the tool is still pretty new. So we came out with it in March. It's about 6 months old. So right now we're really focusing on familiarizing people with it. We know the UN has been using it quite regularly in their crisis dashboards, and being able to take a look and see how conflicts are really developing and changing. And we're hoping that the next step then will be that they'll sort of apply this to more on-the-ground operations. But we're still kind of in the early stages. Yeah, it's really different depending on the country. And I think one interesting element of CAST that we've built in is sort of looking at exactly what's driving the forecast that we're making and how that's different for every country or for every province within those countries. So you can really look specifically and see, was it seasonal trends in violence? Was it the types of activity that were going on in a province that were bordering the area? Is it interactions between militaries and civilians that are really sort of ramping up conflict into the future? So you can get really specific at what the underlying drivers of conflict are, which is something really unique to our tool. For sure. I think actually one of the strengths is the prediction that it can make during active conflicts. That's some of the most accurate forecasts that we get are from conflicts that are ongoing, where we have a lot of really rich data coming in about what's happening on the ground there. So places like I mentioned, Somalia or Sudan, these are areas where there's ongoing activity and ongoing conflicts, and the tool is very accurate in being able to predict how those might shift over time. So if anything, it's places where governments and organizations already have resources, oftentimes committed to those places. So this can be a really useful tool for how to better leverage those resources, where to shift them geographically within the country, where to really focus efforts. Yeah, for sure. So ACLED in general is a data set that's updated weekly on information around the globe. So we've really been focusing on the crisis in Gaza and Israel. We've been collecting a lot of information about it over the last 3 weeks or a month. What we've really found is that, for example, in Gaza, we've seen more airstrikes there than any other country in the Middle East since 2020, already just in this short time period. We've been tracking protests globally around the world. So we've seen over 4,000 protests about Israel, about Palestine, either in support of or against. I think constituting over a third of global protests right now is focused really on this one issue. So ACLED data are really rich in information about both the demonstration side of it globally and also what's exactly going on in the area. It's sort of the only resource of collecting all the information we're getting from news sources and having it in one sort of data set that you can really clearly map events and see how the conflict is changing in almost real time. It's tricky to say. It's often really difficult to sort of draw a direct connection between protests and the conflict. Certainly, I think you might see some changes in government behavior or attitudes if there's really large-scale protests. In the case of Israel, Gaza, like I said, we're seeing over a third of protests globally focused on this one issue. So I wouldn't be surprised if it did have some sort of an effect on governments and the pressures that they're putting on the Israeli government, and also trying to help the civilian effort in Gaza. Yeah. I think at ACLED, our core mission is really to promote data-driven decision-making. So that's why we put together this data set on tracking all of the incidents around the world, so that governments and decision-makers can essentially have one place to objectively look at the state of a conflict and see how it's developing. being able to rely on that information, that it's verified, it's coded by actual humans, it's not machine collected, it's verified, being able to really rely on what those trends are showing you. And we've often heard from people on the ground that oftentimes the data that we're providing are even more accurate than what they're able to get from the field. So it's a really accessible resource, I think, for people. And we really encourage in the peace building space for people to really rely more on data and become more data literate and more reliant on good data for driving what those decisions should be, and not so much relying on only those more traditional methods like, expert analysis, field staff reports, which are obviously very useful, but I think can be really complemented by a strong data-driven approach as well. Sure, I'll just say that you can access our data at acleddata.com. We update the data globally, so across 243 countries and territories around the world every week. So there's always information. We have an API, so you can easily digest the information. And our CAST tool, the conflict alert system, is also available on the website there.
Thank you so much.
Great, thank you.